Good evening and welcome to the January 10th, 2023 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. If we can have roll call, Shannon?
Messina. Messina?
Here.
Fleming?
Barely here.
Ingalls?
Yes, here.
Tripp?
Here.
Mandel?
Here.
McCracken?
Here.
Ward?
Here.
Thank you. Can you please join me for the pledge? I pledge allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can we have a motion to approve our December 13th, 2022 minutes?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Have a motion, need a second?
Second.
All in favor?
I have
Aye.
one.
Aye.
I have one
Oh,
small
I'm sorry.
correction.
I'm sorry, gotta be
Sorry.
quick.
My name is misspelled on page 11, but other than that, they're fine.
Okay, great, thank you. At this time, it'll be public comments, and that's anything that we're not going to be talking about that's on our agenda for our public hearing. So does anyone wish to make any public comments at this time? No. Okay. Staff comments. Thanks,
Okay,
Elaine.
good evening, Commissioners. So a couple of updates for you. So the impact fee update has been kicked off. We had a meeting with the consultant team and some of the departments yesterday to kind of talk about the timeline and the scope of work for that. So you are serving as the Development Impact Fee Advisory Committee, and there are going to be 3 meetings with your group. We'll work on scheduling those. The tentative dates are in April, June, and August. So we'll get you more information as that rolls out, but just wanted you to be aware that's happening, and we will be coordinating with NIBCA as well during that process. For February, we don't have any public hearing items, but I want you to keep that on your calendars. I know it's Valentine's Day, so it's not a great meeting date, but we need a tentative hold in case we have other business items that need to come forward. So we'll let you know that as soon as possible. And then lastly, our short-term rental ordinance work. We are supposed to be receiving the data from Granicus, the company we hired to provide that data. We should be getting that this week. And so we've scheduled the meeting with our ad hoc committee next week to review that and kind of talk about next steps. So keep you posted on that. That's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, appreciate it. Any commission comments? No. Okay, we're going to move into our public hearing portion of our meeting. There are sign-up sheets for each one of our hearings. If you want to speak on any of the hearings, just make sure you sign up. And then if you change your mind, you didn't sign up, you want to sign up before I close that public hearing, I'll let you guys know, and you can come up and speak at that time. The first one that we had on the agenda is going to be moved to at the end, okay, and that was the proposed warehouse storage special use permit in a C17 zoning district, and that was the RC Worst. So that one's going to be moved to the end. Right now, we're going to be doing a proposed community organization special use permit in an R12 zoning district. Tammy, you can give us a little update?
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
So this is a request by Children's Village, represented by Ryan Johnson, the applicant, with Architects West, and the applicant is Children's Village, requesting the approval of a community organization special use permit on a total of 9.7 acres. The property location is 1350 West Hanley Avenue, and the legal notice was published in the Coeur d'Alene Press on December 21st, 2022. So this is a location map of the subject property outlined here in the white. For reference, this is Hanley, and this is Ramsey Road. Coeur d'Alene Place PUD is in this area, and Lake City High School here. Again, this is the subject property outlined here, and I'll give you a little general information on this request. So the applicant is requesting a approval of a community organization special use permit in the R12 zone. If the request is granted, it would allow the applicant to construct a new building to be utilized as a multi-agency family support center with other future buildings on the site. It will aid in helping families in need to find resources and will be operating as an office space. There are 2 existing residential type homes already located on the property. One is here and one is located here. I believe there are about 10 kids per residential home and 2 adults that are typically there. And then this is the existing office, which they use in support of these uses. The proposed expansion of Children's Village is not allowed under the existing special use permit. Therefore, an additional special use permit for the community organization use is required for this activity. So I've provided the conceptual site plan, and the applicant's architect will get into a little more detail, but I thought I'd give you an overview as we work through this presentation. So this is the existing office located here, one existing residence here, an existing residence here, and then they've got an outbuilding here. And then they have this labeled as future building, but this may be a future pavilion, that type of thing for the kids there on the site. The proposed building is going to be located here. It would have a separate access coming off of Hanley Avenue with parking. So there are 3 required findings for this request special use permit. That this proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. So the subject property is within the city limits, and it falls in the comprehensive plan as compact neighborhood place type. And this is the approximate location of the subject property here, and it is compact neighborhood. Compact neighborhood places are medium-density residential areas located primarily in older locations in Coeur d'Alene, and there is an established street grid with bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Development is typically single-family, duplex, triplex, fourplex, townhome, green courts, and auto courts. Supporting uses typically include neighborhood parks, recreation facilities, and parking areas. And this proposed special use permit is a civic-type use. Finding B8B, the design and planning of the site is or is not compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent properties. So again, the proposed special use permit is for community organization for a new building to be constructed as a multi-agency family support center for families in crisis. And there is an existing community education special use permit on that site, which was approved in 1989. That was approved to allow 6 residential type homes on that parcel. Only 2 of them have currently been built. An existing special use permit also exists for a child care facility on the property, and that has also been in effect since 1988. And they utilize that child care facility special use permit to care for the kids that are going to be staying on the site. And continued on finding B8B, the subject property does abut Centennial Terrace and Pine Grove Park subdivisions along that eastern property boundary and Lake Forest subdivision to the north. United Methodist Church is to the west and does abut the property, and Lake City Community Church is located on the south property line, and Ramsey Road does lie to the west of the subject property. And again, this is the site plan, and I'll let the architect get into a little more detail about it, but they have provided some parking here. They'll be providing some street trees, and there is an existing fence that acts as a buffer, and that was installed originally with the special use permit, which was required at that time. So I'm going to provide some site photos, give you the context of the site and where they want to put the proposed building. So this is the site photo showing the existing office on the site, and this is looking east. And this is the site photo looking south. This is a view of the driveway and the secure access gate entering the property where the residential housing is located. And this is from the subject property access point, and this is looking west along Hanley Avenue. And this is looking east from the access point along Hanley. And this is looking west at the neighboring church that's existing and abuts the site. This is a site photo of one of the residential homes that does exist already on the site. And you can see the 2 that have been completed, and as I mentioned, there are about 10 kids or so that stay there at times. This is the area for the proposed building where it will be located. And that's a better site photo of where this proposed structure would be located. And this is the accessory building that's on the site where I believe they store some of their items. As far as zoning, the property is zoned R12, and you can see everything around here is R12. And this is R8, and then C17 across. with R8 as well. As far as land uses, the blue indicates these are civic uses. The subject property is civic along with these two churches, and then the school is on the west side of Ramsey. Finding B8C, the location size of the proposal are such that the development will or will not be adequately served by the existing streets and public facilities and services. So city staff from all the departments did review this application in regards to public utilities and facilities, and each department did indicate that there are adequate public facilities and public utilities available for this proposed request and had no objection. As far as traffic generation, the estimates were not available for the ITE trip generation manual, but as the applicant stated, it's expected traffic entering and exiting the site would be very minimal. Streets and Engineering did not have any objections to this requested special use permit. And there were no recommended conditions for this request. And let's see, I've got some conditions here. So I'll provide the action alternatives and then we'll go over the conditions. They're in your staff report. So the Planning Commission will need to consider this request and make appropriate findings to approve, deny, and deny without prejudice. So the conditions are in your staff report, or excuse me, there are no conditions. I'm getting this one confused with the other one. I apologize. And that's all I have, unless you have any questions.
Go ahead, John.
Thanks for your report, Tammy. Appreciate it. You mentioned a fence on the east side. Is there a picture that illustrates that, or could you kind of describe, that's it there?
This is the fence here along this property line, and it's been there since the original buildings were built in '89.
Can't see that well. Is
I don't
that
know if it's 5
chain
feet.
link
Yeah,
or
it's
is
like
it?
a 5 or 6 foot chain link fence.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks,
And
Tammy.
the applicant and representatives are also here.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay.
Hello, Commissioners. Ryan
Just
Johnson.
state your name and the city you live in, and I'll swear you in.
All right. Ryan Johnson, Coeur d'Alene.
All right. Do you solemnly swear and affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Oh, go right ahead, thank you.
All right. As I stated, my name is Ryan Johnson with Architects West, and we're here to present the Children's Village Assessment Center. I think, despite today's news article, this is not a detention facility. I'll let Rosa Metler with the Children's Village describe the program for it.
If you can just state your name and the city you're in, and I'll swear you in, and we'll go from there.
The city I reside in, is that what you're asking for?
You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go right ahead.
So this is for a multi-agency resource center. It's aimed at doing a single screening process for children and families in crisis so that we can assess and mitigate any emergency situations like crisis, like shelterings or runaway behaviors where families need time to take a pause. Their kids could be admitted into our residential homes that already exist, but it gives them a place to come together with professionals to help them resolve issues in the home. But it is not a residential facility as deemed in the paper today. So it's a single point of contact that allows us to assess them in a crisis and then provide future resource support on an ongoing basis.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right. So this is the floor plan, as you see, color-coded for kind of public space, and then the private space is the green. Behind closed doors, offices for the multiple agencies, reception, clothes closet for kids in need of clothes. Think of like the core group. They'll be hopefully building that one out. Some basic elevations, what it will look like facing that east side. And as I get to the site plan, I'll address Commissioner Ingles' question about the site fence or the boundary fence. Some basic materials here, metal siding and hardy siding or cement fiber siding. north, south, east, west elevations. And then, whoa, here is our site plan. As Ms. Stroud expressed, we are entering off of Hanley. The current Children's Village is a secured site, and we plan to remain a secured site, so that will be public access, a separate public access to this facility. The east fence is chain link, but our intent is to put some slats in there, create the visual buffer from both sides, you know, to benefit both Children's Village and their neighbors. And then the fencing between these buildings, the existing buildings and the new building, to maintain that secure site of the Children's Village while providing public access into the assessment center. And then I just have some perspective views for you. It's pretty simple commercial building for the most part. I can get into the details of the construction if you'd like, or answer any other questions you may have.
I do have a question. The Children's Village has a very warm, inviting residential feel. This looks very commercial, and I worry that children look at that like a jail cell and the reaction to it. They're coming to a place that scares them. And so would you not want to make it as inviting and hospitable as you could?
Yes, there is consideration about, you know, a pitched roof and make it
A little more
a
hospitable.
little more homey.
Yeah, homey.
And integrate with the
'Cause they're-
campus, and that may come
Yeah.
down the road
Okay.
in further phases, but at this point,
Yeah,
really,
it's an idea.
It is, you know, a commercial building.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it looks more adult, and the children should feel unintimidated. That's just my gut feeling.
Okay.
But otherwise, you know, great plan. It looks really good. So, thank you.
Go ahead.
I just have one question, if I could. I know that you've been there a long time. It has a center driveway to come into the property. Why are we putting a brand-new driveway on the east side of the property?
to provide public access that could be accessed throughout the day without being coded in by the main office. So this building isn't necessarily going to be operated by Children's Village all the time, you know, during the business hours. There will be other public agencies operating out of that. And then I believe Children's Village will support those agencies.
I'm Vanessa Mose. I reside in Cleveland, in Coeur d'Alene.
Do you solemnly swear to and/or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Go right ahead.
So I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Children's Village, and we're really excited about this project. But to answer that question, it's really important for our little guys, for our kids. We try really hard to be very good neighbors. Part of that is them on a bike in a residential feeling cul-de-sac most of the day, especially during the summertime. And so a big consideration of this plan was to provide this service publicly to families in need so that we could reach further, but also let our little guys on tricycles and bikes feel safe. Perceived safety is really important for us, for them to feel. That gate isn't a locked, they can go right under it, we've seen it. But it isn't, it's just to preserve their felt safety. And that's why we thought a different entry point might use our facility better.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
A question for the whole group there is I think, again, for the benefit of both sides of this, the people that live to the east and the privacy of people looking in on your facilities, there's sensitivities there, I would think. Assuming this were to be approved, would you be acceptable to us adding a condition that requires just what you said you're going to do? So for the record, it would say that the condition exists to add fence slats to the chain link fence such to create a site obscuring fence.
To a certain extent, I think yes. If you narrow that down to the eastern border of the fence,
That's
it's more
yeah.
palatable,
Yeah.
rather than the whole
eastern
9
border,
acres.
the eastern side was what I was
Yeah,
thinking.
I think that could certainly be accommodated.
Thank you.
I have a question, maybe Vanessa would be the best one to answer, is just what other agencies will be sharing that space?
It's going to be a group effort we're putting together, so our governing board will retain governance of the space, given that it is our property. So there will be an additional committee set up. Some of the stakeholders that we're starting to talk with is the Coeur d'Alene School District, Post Falls School District, Spirit Lake Police, also Juvenile Diversion and Probation of Kootenai County, Juvenile Justice Outreach of Kootenai County, and then we're also starting to talk with Charity Reimagined, CASA, Safe Passage, and then Children's Mental Health, which is a Department of Health and Welfare division. They've been speaking about if that might be a possibility to place their interns into the space so that they can also help resource mine. So there isn't a clear answer to that, but it's really a true multi-agency
helpful.
resource.
Thank you.
Yep.
And is the building itself just going to be for operation during the daytime, or is it certain hours, or can you touch on that a little bit?
So we are planning on opening business hours. We would like to extend that into the evening up until 8 p.m. Just because a lot of people work and family crises are not contained to business hours. So we plan on getting to 8 p.m. is our extended time.
Okay, great, thank you. No, okay. If we have any other questions that might arise, we'll get you back later.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I have a number of people that signed up, did not indicate to speak, but have been in favor of it, and I'll just go through the names. Joanne Rowland. Okay. Did you not wish to speak? Steve Rowland. Okay. Vanessa, you spoke. Monique. Okay. You're in favor, did not wish to speak. Row.
Metter?
Okay. Oh, no, sorry. Tony Capel. Okay. Karen
Shomel?
Schomel. Okay. Sorry. I'll destroy people's names if you give me a chance. Bill King. Kling.
That one we can get.
No. Where? Oh,
Speak?
okay.
Would you like to speak?
No,
No.
he indicated not to speak. Joanne Wolf, and you did not wish to speak? No? Okay, it was opposed. Joe Pickens, and you did wish to speak. You want to speak or not? Come on up if you want to speak. And that's all I have on the list, so if anybody else wants to speak, I'll come on up after Joe is done.
I live on one of the east,
Okay, just state your name and the city you live in.
Joellen Pickens, Coeur d'Alene,
Okay.
Idaho.
And do you solemnly swear and affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go right ahead.
Yes, my backyard backs up to Children's Village backyard. And the chain link fence the architects are talking about is only about 5 feet tall. So this would be definitely a matter of quiet enjoyment of our backyards. And I talked to 2 other neighbors, and they're very upset about this. We also question why, if there's a street right in front of the buildings, why they need to put another street right outside our backyard fences. That there would be cars coming down day and night. It's right through where the little children play, the playground for the little children, the younger children. It's right where this street would come through. There's already a parking lot right across. I have a picture on my phone. I went into my backyard yesterday and took a picture over the fence of where there are cars parked for the employees there, already working there, that the people in this new building could very well park instead of building another parking lot. And then, are there gonna be lights on in this parking lot all night? And there was somewhere, I went down to City Hall, I came to the building right next door and got a better map than was what the city sent to us. And somewhere in there is a mention of juvenile officers or juvenile delinquent officers who will be wearing street clothes in this building. So we're concerned who's going to be coming to this building, and if the city wants to have other departments or other entities in there besides Children's Village entities, and it's gonna run to maybe over $6 million, who's gonna be paying for this? We were told 1.5 million, and now it's somewhere in there it was in the paper yesterday, I think, that it might cost over $6 million, and then they will go to the public to fund this. And so all these questions need to be answered before this is approved. And like the neighbors and myself said, is this, right now they want it to stay open until 8 o'clock, but if you're out in your backyard with your family at night, are these cars going to be running back and forth behind your 5-foot-tall chain link fence? That slats are not going to keep anyone from seeing into your yard. It's only a 5-foot-tall fence, maybe not even 5 foot tall. When I was out there yesterday to take the picture, it's like up to here on me, the fence. So that was what I wanted to say.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am,
Uh,
the 5-foot high fence, I think code permits 6. Would you and your neighbors feel more comfortable if the fence was 6 feet tall?
Possibly, but I don't feel comfortable with an unnecessary road going right along my backyard when there's one maybe 150 feet away from it. That
Very good.
why they can't use that, and that road would go right through the very young children's play area. They would have to take away from the young children's play area to get that. And then the lights at night, if there's a parking lot, would lights be on there, out there all night long? And this is not just my concern, this is my neighbors' concerns too. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. I have no one else that signed up that wished to speak. Before I bring the applicant back up, if he wishes to come up to address what he just heard. Okay.
I wish I'd written down all of her comments so I could go through them one by one to address them. As we stated earlier, this is independent access so that the Children's Village can remain a secure site while the business operations are running out of this building. That's the reason we're doing the second or the additional driveway. Lights are a concern, street lights. This is a parking lot and the parking lots have to be lit, right? Anytime after 4 o'clock in the winter, they'll be lit. But we have that concern for the housing for the children too. So we're working with Thorco to provide the shrouds on those street lights so the light isn't shining in their bedrooms in the housing. And we can certainly do that so it's a 0 lot line shroud. So they're not getting too much light pollution, so to say, into their sites.
She had concern about the fence, something going through taking away from the children's playground?
Yeah, and we were trying to be as, I guess, have a light impact on those backyards as possible. We understand that the backyards are where the kids play, but they also play out in the front yards and the streets and a whole lot of other area that Rosa would like to tell you about.
Yeah.
Sure.
No, I really appreciate the concern for our children, so thank you for speaking to that. We actually have a large side yard on the first house, which is the house that's going to be where the parking, some of the parking space that you'll see at the the front end of the entry point, and then thank you, and then
okay, there you
where the
go.
road enters in. So the very first building where it
There's a
says
mouse up
existing
there.
residence.
Use your mouse.
Oh.
There.
Fabulous, thank you. Okay, so this existing residence right here will have some of the backyard taken in for this entry point. We actually have a large side yard. It looks like trees right here, but it's actually one large tree and then some bushes. And so this large side yard, we have a play structure right here that will be moved to the side. Over here on this side, so there's actually plenty of play space still within this backyard because it's actually fenced here all the way around to the back. So we do maintain play yard. It's actually kind of dead space right now. We don't have any play structures back there, and so we'll still be able to utilize that space for the play yard. Oops, I'm sorry.
It's not on there.
Oh, okay. The second yard is actually undisturbed from their backyard. Their backyard remains intact. So it's just this first building, but we have determined that we'll be moving the play structure here so that it still is operable on the side. Is there any other questions
I
I
got a
could
question
answer?
for Hillary. Regarding landscaping along that fence yard, any city requirements or anything that needs to be put there or not, or?
They've met the requirement with the current fence. You can certainly add something if that's something that's agreeable to the applicant. I think the screening, adding the slats and that, but you're just wondering if the existing use meets our current code for the screening buffering.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Playground defense.
Looking at the site plan, I'll look over here where I can see it. Here's our effort to kind of minimize impact on that backyard, rather than, the business building right now doesn't have a backyard kids are playing in, so that's why we've got kind of the perpendicular parking, but then we go to parallel to preserve as much of the existing backyard at that residence before we get in to these, the business building. What else did I miss?
Hold,
We hit lights, privacy, I'm sorry.
You need to address the commission, not the
Okay,
audience.
I'm sorry.
yeah, if I think I got most of the concerns that I heard from
There was one.
Joe, go ahead.
It's probably worth clarification about paying for it. I think just to clarify, when you say go to the public to fund it, it's really to raise money from the community, not taxpayers, right?
Yes, the article that came out was not clear. Tammy and I discussed that earlier this morning, that it was really misleading. This is the full budget. It was a grant money from Governor Little reallocated $6.5 million from the Idaho Approved State Fund in 2022. He reallocated $6.5 million towards youth mental health in order to stand up in each region an assessment center. Kootenai County is the highest fined for incarcerating youth of status offenses, and so this is a statewide effort to build multi-agency resource centers to try to get kiddos out of the system and help families stay out as well, which will decrease taxpayer money. But the building itself will be fully funded by this grant. There won't be solicitation otherwise. And operational expenses will be written into small grants from different grantors, but there will be no impact to taxpayers. Thank you.
I did not read the article, so I don't know what it
Yeah.
said or not, but,
I appreciate the opportunity to clarify.
yeah,
'cause
if you want, is there anything else in that article that you want to clarify?
It was an interesting one. No, I mean, I think I stated that it was grant monies. We actually were approached over and over by our local Kootenai County partners. We are really, really proud of the partnerships that we have in this city. With or without this facility, we do this work. This will allow us to do it in a greater way. We believe the traffic will be very minimal. We're already doing all of this in our small spaces, and it will just allow us to do it better for our families locally, so.
And it was brought up, undercover agents being, I don't know what that was.
I think that meant, yes. It will not be police officers at all. We were approached, so this funding is through Idaho Department of Juvenile Justice. That is the fund that it came through from Brad Little's reallocation. The part of it is our probation officers are working with school resource officers right now in all of our school districts to resource mine children who are truant or their behaviors are escalating. There's usually something happening at home, and so those students are already working with diversion officers of Kootenai County, and potentially probation, all of which are plain clothed. They do not wear a gun, or, they're not in a squad car. So that's what that was referencing.
Okay.
But it isn't. That's what our biggest worry about that article was, that it sounded like a jail, and it is the opposite. It is really trying to keep everybody out of the system so that we can privately resource and help these families and wrap around them through their crisis.
Okay.
So.
Any other questions before? Go ahead.
Well, I have a question, Mr. Johnson. The street lighting, it's a familiar chord with me. Where I live, they put in the new bright street lights, and they were just a pain. And working through Vista, we finally put, I don't know, a shield, something like that, where it was a very defined line. And it was a great improvement. I would encourage maybe you to meet with the neighbors and explain and show them how you can do the same. You will do the same thing, where the light line will drop in the corner and not be shining in their backyard.
Exactly.
Thank you, yeah.
That's our
But if you
intent.
could meet with them, might be helpful if you talk to them.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
And if the 6 foot, it's a 5-foot fence, the 6-foot fence, I'm not sure what a motion's going to be, if that's going to be a condition or not. That might be something, if a condition is put on, that instead of a 5-foot, it has to be a 6-foot, and whatever it takes to do that, then I don't know if that's a condition that might be or might not be. Just want to bring that out to you.
If it is, we'll address it. If
Okay.
it isn't, we'll address it.
Won't address it.
All right.
All right. All right. All right, anything else? Any further questions?
I'll just say what.
Go ahead.
I fully understand the idea of that private drive, and it's not like it's a public street, and I'm sure you have a pretty good liability carrier. I'd be very concerned if you were running children down. It's a perfect location, this type of use, in my opinion. You got a church, you got a high school on the other side, you got a major roadway in the north, and, that side gets a little close to single-family homes, but fencing, some landscaping, and, this is a use that's been there for 30 years, and it's a use we need, and hopefully be a lot longer.
Okay.
All right.
All right. No other questions? I'm going to
I
close.
think there was a question
Oh,
when I was
sorry.
discussing with Tammy about the distance. Just want to point out, this building is 60 feet away from that property line. So we've got some distance to buffer, so to speak.
All right, great.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm going to close public testimony on this and bring it to the commission for some discussion and then a motion? Discussion?
A question of planning staff, if I could, before we maybe deliberate and whatnot. And it seems like my recollection is where we've had a number of projects over the years where we're talking about buffering, either buffer with plant materials and whatnot. Sometimes you buffer with a site obscuring fence. And that's in the code somewhere, the site obscuring fence, and it's specified, 50% or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I think a chain link fence with the little slats in there would probably meet that. But is 6 feet kind of the presumptive standard?
For commercial use, it kind of depends, but yes, 6 feet is what's allowable, and I would say is probably more standard these days, especially for that kind of buffering if it was site obscuring fencing, like you said.
Thank you.
Okay.
And then to elaborate on that, if I could, if you're, I kind of anticipated maybe a little concern on that east side, and I think something needs to be done there. The slats are fine. I'm a little bit happier with a 6-foot fence. I hate to add a big cost driver to the project. It's already probably, hurting for money, but I throw that out there.
With a 6-foot fence, more so than any landscaping or anything like that?
Because that's an option too, so the code allows for, you can mix it and you can have some evergreen trees or shrubs or things to kind of break up that to provide more of the buffer and the visual barrier too. I don't know what would be more cost effective at this point.
English ivy, it doesn't stop growing ever. Trust me. Cheap way to
I
do
would
it.
agree with Commissioner Ingalls, especially, there's still the potential for 4 more residential buildings, right? So that area might be busier, and so addressing it now for future use makes sense, but I don't know how prescriptive we can be except to say buffering and site obscuring and let them decide the most
should be.
cost-effective way to do that.
That's what I would do.
I'd give a little directions on perhaps whoever makes the motion.
Well, let's, you know,
Well, 1 foot
we
doesn't-
had a discussion a couple of weeks ago about 6-foot versus 4-foot fence, you know, and it was, I don't want to be ornery, John, but, you know, there's often a 4-foot fence is good because, you know, you get more view. I would suggest, you know, that if the applicant puts in a 4-foot fence and the neighbors say 4-foot fence is fine, you know, then why do we want to dink around with it? You know? Now, if there's future growth in the area and it requires, you know, more screening, maybe at that time we could add another 2 feet to the fence. But I just, anyway, that was my thoughts.
It's
I
a
think-
5-foot
I-
fence.
I-
It's
well,
5 foot.
And
It's
I'm not
5 foot.
sure
5
if
foot.
other buildings are gonna be built on that, do they have to come back?
They're allowed
They're
to
allowed.
expand to 6 residential units.
It's just this building use and type.
Yeah.
Before the motion is made, I would like to also say, and we, along with others, hardly support this. I think this is a very nice asset to our community, to a very deserving group in our community that needs as much, I don't want to say assistance, but support as we as a community can provide them. And I think this is just great. Thank you.
Yeah, I
May
agree
may
that,
I just
children-
add, Chairman?
Oh, I'm
Massey,
sorry.
May I just add that City Code 1706-830 talks about the buffer yard requirements and specifies a 5-foot fence.
So,
Also specifies when there's landscaping, shrubbery and that type of stuff, that it has to be a certain obscuring a certain percentage within 3 years, and it's usually left up to the planning director.
Good. Further discussion? Go ahead. I'm sorry, Phil.
I mean, it looks to me like you got a 20-foot wide private road running down there. How much buffering do we need?
Right.
Everything is to the other side, to the west side of that road. Now, maybe traffic car lights or something, but as far as parking lot lighting today that you purchased is clearly controlled so that it shoots down on the property, not into the neighbors. And I just feel like, you know, that the way it's laid out is fine by me, is all that I'm saying.
so I, based on the input from Mr. Adams with the 5-foot fence being kind of the presumptive standard, I'd go back to, again, I think we heard the applicant in his presentation suggest that they were going to do something, even before I brought it up, that maybe we make a motion with we add a condition that just says to add the slats to the existing 5-foot fence. And, yeah.
I would agree with that, but I also think if we can mix in some vegetation, that would also probably be a good thing.
Less commercial.
Less, a little softer of a buffer there.
Well, that can be, depending on who makes the motion and the condition on that, we can go with a motion.
I'll give it a try.
Good, thank you.
Need to take a turn. This matter having come before the Planning Commission on January 10, 2023, and there being present a person requesting approval of item SP-1-23, a community organization special use permit in the R12 zoning district. Applicant is Architects West, represented by Ryan Johnson. Location, 9.735 acre parcel on the south side of Hanley Avenue between Ramsey Road and US 95, commonly known as 1350 West Hanley Avenue. Findings, justification for the decision and criteria, the standards and facts relied upon. We adopt items B1 to B7 as stated. Pursuant to section 1709-220 special use permit criteria, a special use permit may be approved only if the proposal conforms to all of the following criteria to the satisfaction of the Planning Commission. First criteria, B8A, the proposal is in conformance with the comprehensive plan. specifically in the compact neighborhood and maintaining communities' friendly, welcoming atmosphere. Goal EL3, educational environment, resources for all people. Maybe this is less education and more just civic engagement and community outreach and resources to families. And health and safety, supporting the social, mental, and physical health in Coeur d'Alene and the greater region, providing safe programs and facilities for the community's youth to gather, connect, and take part in healthy social activities. The second criteria, B8B, the design and planning of the site is compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent properties. This is based on the fit, particularly to the west with the religious organizations and school. And is it compatible with the existing land use pattern? Yes. Is the design and appearance of the project compatible with the surrounding neighborhood in terms of architectural style? I think we've met that with discussions on softening the commercial aspect and the buffer with some vegetation. We can add that as a condition. And the third is B8C, the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will be adequately served by existing streets, public facilities, and services based on comments and from our city departments and no objections. So order of conclusion and decision, the Planning Commission pursuant to the aforementioned finds that Architects West for a special use permit as described in the application should be approved with the special condition that the fence on the east side is it's
Slats.
slat, yeah.
Add slats to the
Add slats and include some landscape vegetation to make it feel more residential. Is that an appropriate condition?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Mandel.
Second.
I have a second by Commissioner Ingalls. Do we have roll call, Shannon, please?
Fleming?
Yes.
Ingalls?
Yes.
Lutrip?
Yes.
Mandel?
Yes.
McCracken?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Messina?
Yes. Okay, motion passes. Congratulations. Best of luck to you. Okay, next is S1-23, 5-lot preliminary plat subdivision. And Sean's going to give us a review of that.
Announced that there is a request for a subdivision for a 5-lot preliminary plat. Cherry Point subdivision is the name that has been assigned to this. The applicant's name is here. The request, as I said, is 5 lots. Each one of these lots would contain 2 units, except for the last 5th one would be a single-family home with an accessory dwelling unit. It is on 1.297 acres in an R8 zone. It's located east of 4th Street, south of East Whispering Pines Lane, and west of the existing homes along North Whisper Drive, and it was published in the press to meet the requirements for public notice. Mailings were also provided and the site was posted. All right, so here's an area map showing the site. Most people will recognize it as that triangle piece of property as you get north of Costco along 4th Street when it starts to realign itself and makes a little bit of an angle opposite of the honeysuckle angle on the farther east. You can see the Village 1 and 2 PUD is located across the street. Costco on the corner, as mentioned. This green line is showing where city limits is at. So this is a zoomed in area. And in the staff report, you can see that because of the size of the property and the shape of the property, it would be very difficult to put something on with to make it pencil for costs of property today. And so the way that it was designed is such that, let me get by the findings real quick so I can show you how this works so everybody can understand, is that it would not qualify for a PUD. It's an R8, so it has to meet all those zoning standards. They can't ask for any concessions for setbacks or heights or parking or other things like that. So it's a fairly difficult site to design around. And so the applicant worked with staff to design it such that, you know, the property lines would run along here, meeting setbacks on either side of the lot, and then you have a deflection here so that it captures the frontage that's required and the lot size that's required in an R8. So in an R8, it requires, so a duplex lot requires 11,000 square feet, which is double what a single-family house requires. So it's the same amount of property as two single-family houses. They just have shared walled construction in an R8 versus a higher density zone, which gives concession to lot size. So let's go back real quick. So I'll show you the findings here. There are 4 required findings for a preliminary plat for subdivision, A through D. I'll go through those right now, is that all of the general preliminary plat requirements have or have not been met as attested to by the city engineer. Chris Bosley is our city engineer. He reviewed this and did attest that it does meet that standard. So as this design here shows, there's access, there's one-way access in and out of the site, rather than having separate driveways for each one of these units that would be attempting to back out onto 4th Street. Applicant worked with staff and fire department and all the departments really to come up with a design that would work so that there would be a one-way entrance in and a one-way entrance back out so that cars would be exiting the site in a forward fashion and can actually see the traffic that's coming and going rather than backing onto a street such as 4th, which can get very busy at times. So finding B7B is that the provisions for sidewalks, streets, alleys, rights-of-way, easements, street lighting, fire protection, planting, drainage, pedestrian, and bicycle facilities, utilities are or are not accurate or adequate. Sorry. Page 7 has the full staff comments, but suffice it to say that streets and engineering, water, fire, and wastewater departments have all reviewed the application with regards to the public provisions, and that there is adequate availability, and in some cases they do already exist, and I can show where those are in the photos that are coming up. So this is the utility connections, that circulation that we just talked about. There's shared parking that they have proposed at an angle here, so that there is overflow parking for visitors and such. It's rear loaded, so there's garages to each one, so really they can meet the standard without providing this. They have just gone ahead and provided additional parking because they knew that there would be a demand for it, and since 4th Street is busy and there's no on-street parking, it has to go somewhere. So that's where it ended up. So you can see these are probably the most dangerous pictures that I've ever taken on one of these public hearings. Due to the snow, this is a bike lane. It's half covered in ice, and there's a sidewalk here under the snow somewhere, and I'm traveling south, looking south. This is the end of the property where it's at its widest. There is a wastewater easement that runs through there. That was another limitation to the site that's mentioned in the staff report. You know, sometimes those things can get in the way, but they took lemons and made lemonade with it. That's where the access is at, because you cannot build over a wastewater easement. So this is the north end where the triangle comes to a point. There's stormwater in the city's right-of-way here. This obviously is not very usable because it's not able to meet setbacks. Thus, they designed it such that an ADU would be available to be built here near the corner. It would be allowed in that rear 25-foot yard setback as allowed by ADU code, and then the actual house itself would reside in the building envelope as required by R8 code. Right, so traveling a little further down south, you can see that The Whispering Pines Estates is located here east of the property. There is a fence that runs between the two properties. And then to the south is the abutting home that exists. And this is a picture of that home. And here is approximately where that property line is. I think a portion of this fence encroaches a bit into the subject property, but they have talked, the neighbor and the applicant, they've come to agreement. Right, finding B7C is that the proposed preliminary plat does or does not comply with all the subdivision design standards and all of the subdivision improvement standards. Once again, planning and engineering took a look at this. It does meet those minimum standards. It was quite a feat to get it to meet all of those things because he could not ask for a PUD because it does not meet that 1.5 acre minimum requirement. It's 1.2 change. All right, finding B7D is that the lots proposed in the preliminary plat do or do not meet the requirements of the applicable zoning district. As mentioned, it's R8. So all of the lot size, density, frontage, setbacks, parking, all of those things must be met. There's no concessions, no availability for variances there. So this is the design that worked the best. Also be aware that a preliminary plat will have an opportunity for red line review prior to the improvements being installed and recorded. And once again, there's another opportunity for staff to take a look at it through building permits to make sure that all those standards are met prior to construction. So this is the zoning map of the area. As you can see, this is the village across the street. It is zoned R12 PUD. To the north, R17, Costco is C17, and then as you move east, it becomes less and less dense. R12 to the south, R8 here, there's a piece of R12 here, and then once you get across Honeysuckle, you start dropping down to R5, R3. And so, with that ends the staff report portion. There are 16 proposed conditions. Many of these conditions are requirements of policy of the city, so there's not much in here that is above and beyond what is already policy. However, I'll take a quick run through of what they are. So if there's any damage to the 4th Street frontage, the sidewalks there, that it would have to be fixed. Planning is requiring that the 4th Street traffic, that any vehicles that are exiting the site would do so in a forward fashion, and that the loop driveway must be placed into an easement so that nobody does anything like puts up bollards or fences where the property lines are and prevents access. So that remains open to all users of the site. So like I said, many of these are requirements, policies of the city. These are for water. These are required for all development in the city of Coeur d'Alene, as well as wastewater, the requirements and what their sewer policies are. And then fire, this one's a little more important. It's outside of the box because of the access. No parking fire lane signs must be posted to ensure that vehicles are not parking in the travel lane. They need a specific turning radius inside for fire truck access. It's 25 interior radius, 50 exterior radius, and a minimum of 26-foot wide lane width next to any hydrants, and that surface must be able to support 75,000 pounds for a fire truck. So, Planning Commission will need to consider this request and make appropriate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice. And with that, I'll end my presentation and stand for questions.
Thank you, Sean. Questions, Sean?
Thanks, Sean. Good presentation. 5 lots, correct?
Correct.
Could be 5 different owners, correct?
If they decide to condo it, 4 of those have duplexes on them, or they appear like townhomes, common wall construction. You could have 2 per lot, except for the very north lot will be a single family and an ADU.
So overall, the site, there could be some number of owners.
Yes.
Likely some number of owners.
Correct.
So, looking at this through the lens of a PUD, the one thing that we have that we don't have with a subdivision, we would have as a finding for a PUD, we'd have open space. Number one. Number two, we would have and where I'm coming from here is the finding that we would make that there'd be some entity for perpetual maintenance, i.e. a HOA. So if we have multiple owners on that site, you mentioned the easement, so lot 3 doesn't decide, hey, I'm going to put speed bumps or bollards or whatever, I'm going to block this thing, or whatnot. What's the mechanism that's going to have these 4 or 5 owners get along and figure out how to pass the hat to pay for snow removal and pavement maintenance when necessary, and those kind of things? We make that requirement with a PUD for good reasons, because we know otherwise it's going to be a problem.
Right.
How do we see that isn't a problem here?
So there's a couple of ways of looking at that, and very good question, Commissioner Ingalls. So this is a question for the applicant on what the final product may be. As I understand it, it could be condoed, and I'm guessing it will be condoed. At that point, then there is a homeowners association that's created and recorded, and that is how maintenance is handled over the long haul.
It doesn't become a city problem.
Correct, it's private
but,
property.
Just want to see it gets addressed. Thank you.
Good, Phil.
Yeah, Sean, just a couple of questions. Now, a plat, really, we don't have a lot of review. Either they comply with the requirements, it's almost like a ministerial function. But in looking at it, 4th Street's a pretty busy street, and across the street are pretty substantial developments. Is there any, and Public Works already approved it, so it may not be a non-issue, but is there any offset requirement for those 2 driveways to offset a certain distance one across the street? So we don't have any conflicting movements at 8 o'clock in the morning or 5 in the afternoon.
Right. That is a great question. Because it is one way, there's not going to be incoming and leaving traffic from the same point of access here and here. Chris Bosley did take a look at that, and so it would be one way. There's really not enough width to do 2-way, because it would have to be a minimum of 24 feet wide to have traffic that can come and go. So that reduces the opportunity, I guess, or number of conflicts that could happen at that same time, because you will have one entrance and one exit. So they do not line up. I don't think there would be any way to get them to line up based upon the triangular size of the property and being able to meet setbacks and still build. So this is the best result to a tough situation.
Let me ask you one other thing. That private road, is that and I couldn't tell off the plat, is that a separate tract, or is that just part of each lot that abuts it?
And going along with Mr. Ingalls' earlier question is that normally in a PUD that would end up in a non-buildable tract separate from, because they would be able to use all of that square footage towards the density calculation in the long run. In this case, that is not the case because it's not a PUD. So staff had made the condition that go into an easement across each one of those parcels so that they could maintain the frontage that they need and the lot size that they need to be able to build what is shown here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
2 things. In front of each rear entry, which will be their main entry, will be these large swales. Isn't there a new system now that we don't have to have that whole basin catch with mosquitoes stuck in there? Is there another solution to just having that basin in front of each opening? I worry about kids falling in, a lot of water. I just don't
So
love those things.
are you talking about like swales on the
swale, the
site?
traditional swale, the big bucket of water that sits there and just
Yes,
breeds mosquitoes.
There's a large one right here on the corner, and that is in the city's right of way. It's, as I understand it.
And there's 3 on the back.
There is,
right where you're
between the
coming
units.
I think Welch Comer mentioned there's a new way to do those without having to make the big ditches. Might be something to look at, because that's a hazard. I mean, kids drown in those stupid things.
It's a discussion we can certainly have with the applicant,
There's a
assuming
better way to
approval,
do
if
it.
it does get approved or not. But My understanding is that the injection wells, that they have to be run by DEQ, and they have to be approved and looked at.
Yeah.
So if there is another way to do it, and it's.
Belchcomer mentioned one that they're applying down at Atlas, and I was curious to know what they're actually doing, that they're avoiding those kind of deep catch basins. But I see a lot of them down there, so I don't know. The other thing is signage. I guess when we have this, there'll have to be signage, no entry, one way only, that kind of signage.
Correct.
And then I think these aprons going out onto the street are a little bit narrow. They're straight shot, and they probably need to flare out since you're going either that way or that way. Just a small thing, but this is indicative. I'm assuming they'll do some good
Yes.
aprons.
Engineering will review that. That's through an encroachment permit, and they'll decide whether or not it needs to be a residential or an urban style approach.
Because we have a center turn lane in this Fourth
Correct.
Street. So
It's surprising how many people don't move over while you're walking
They
down that
don't.
street to use that thing.
no, good luck with that. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Is there any
Okay,
more
Sean,
questions?
appreciate it. No more questions at this time.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Give me
you.
a moment to get the applicant's
Sure.
PowerPoint up, but he'll be here in a second. This is Chet Stringham, and he is the applicant.
Charles, just state your name, the city you live in, and I'll swear you in.
I'm Chet Stringham, and I live in Coeur d'Alene.
Great.
Is the sound quality okay? Can everybody hear me? Wonderful.
Yeah. Do you solemnly swear and affirm the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
We'll go right ahead.
Oh, perfect. First, before I get started, I'd like to thank very much the city of Coeur d'Alene, and particularly Sean, who has just been there throughout this entire process for the last year that we've been working on this process. And the project is an interesting one because of the triangular configuration of the land. And I think in some ways that was kind of a pain, but it's also, I recognize the only reason why I was able to buy the land, because if it weren't triangular, it would have been purchased by somebody many years ago and probably already developed by now, I would guess. So in order to be able to bring this to fruition, we needed to be able to do a number of different things that I've received a tremendous amount of assistance with from many of the city departments. So I've met individually with most of the various people who've been involved, and they've helped to counsel and make recommendations and things. And so I very much appreciate that. So in terms of the triangular configuration of the land, it's an interesting design, but I think Sean had mentioned that we essentially had parallel lines throughout the entire piece of land so that we were able to maintain an orderly appearance from the street and to increase to bolster the curb appeal. But at the same time, we were able to comply with each of the various limitations and regulations that were required of us. So in terms of the design, I think it's about the most efficient that could be done under these circumstances. And there are a number of different ramifications or considerations I think that were made. The first is that the street is fairly noisy, and so for people who are driving by, the vehicles make a fair amount of noise. And so inherent in the design of the individual houses, I've incorporated awnings and various other features that would be able to deflect some of the sound and also to put some trees and partial obscuration of shrubbery and things that will hope to knock down some of the ambient noise from the street, which admittedly is fairly loud. And then in terms of rear-facing issues, we made sure that one of the concerns I would have as a neighbor in this area is that people have backyards on Whisper Drive that immediately faces this. And so here down in, let me see, here in this area on Whisper, there are backyards that immediately face each of these individual units. So we've minimized the number of windows on that part of the complex so that there isn't the feeling that people are being observed at their own backyards and kitchens and things. So we're trying to preserve the privacy of the area. And then in terms of other issues, approximately 2,000 square feet for unit size each. So there'll be really good size, oversized garages that would accommodate two F-150 pickup trucks each without having to shimmy so we're trying to accommodate the types of vehicles that you'd see here in this area and to make sure that people are able to get the things that they need to have there. In terms of specific issues, I think the question, Commissioner Fleming, about the swales, my concern is that I wanted to be able to make sure that the total surface area was adequate. We didn't know exactly what that would be because this hasn't been formally engineered yet. I know that we do have a fair amount of land that's available here down to the corner here in this area, and so we'd be able to potentially either add another swale there if necessary and potentially reduce the total depth of the individual swales that are planned. So that would be one of the other possibilities. The city does have, Sean had mentioned, a swale here in this area. It's a fairly deep one. It exists anyway, irrespective of the property. And if it were necessary for us to build either a fence, a low fence, or something else that would be visually appealing, it would certainly be possible for me to do that too. In terms of other issues, I wanted to discuss the design of the individual houses, and I can show a rendering. Before I show this, I just want to caution that this is my best estimate of what things will look like. I don't mean to imply, to guarantee, or to state that this is actually what things will look like, but this is a blow-up for the purpose of clarification. If there were any questions, we can refer back to that. But this is essentially what I envision the complex looking like. So it's not clear as you drive down the street that it's a triangular configuration. Instead, it looks the same as any other street would. And so I think we've been able to preserve kind of the feel of the neighborhood, even though the outer boundary markers were kind of curious. In terms of other issues, I've shown this as a series of identical buildings, but they're not. And in fact, this is just to show concept. The individual colors will be complementary, but not the same. And so my plan is to have this look like a community that where houses were all built at about the same time, but they aren't identical. So there'll be some individual character, surface developments, and various features. Some likely will have stone wainscoting on the outside, others may not, and some may be lap strake, others may be a shingled appearance, but I want them all to kind of complement each other. You can see in this rendering the awnings that are included on the top floor, and also the awnings that I'm hoping will have some partial sound deflecting capacities for the bottom floor as well. And that's, I'd love to be able to answer questions if you folks have some questions.
John, do you have any questions regarding your questions to Sean about?
No, you heard my question to Sean regarding I just want to understand, how this is going to operate 5 years from now. Are people going to get along when how are they going to figure out when the road needs to be, or the circulation path needs to get repaired? How's it get plowed and all that sort of thing? If this is a PUD, we see a lot of little projects like this that are above an acre and a half. In my view, this kind of begs wanting to be a PUD, and it can't be because it's under an acre and a half. So those issues of HOA kind of things, and how's the snow get removed, and those kind of things. Could you speak to that?
I guess it's kind of a PUD light. It's kind of the spirit in which a PUD likely is intended, and certainly we have some elements of that in this development. But my hope is that everybody will get along with each other. I think the initial plan would be that that I would own the parcel myself, and my plan is to rent to other people, at least for the short term, and that's subject to change. But of course, in order to approve this, I understand that these would all have to qualify as individual freestanding properties, which they will. And my feeling was that irrespective of the ownership, the partial ownerships or combined responsibilities of the various owners, the parcels would have to be plowed anyway. And so people would just potentially get along and work on that together. I would be happy if I did sell to eventually set up an HOA so that if I weren't around to officiate, that there would be rules that people would have to abide by in order to be able to do that, and that presumably would not become a problem that would be inherited by the city.
Thank you.
This would be considered a private driveway, right? Correct, with an easement to all access? So there could easily be, something maybe simpler than a whole HOA, just a road maintenance agreement between all the parcels. And that could get recorded along with the easement, and that might save the process of making an entire HOA, but doing an agreement to maintain the road. Drafted at the same time as that easement.
My understanding is that I'll need to grant easements anyway, and in fact, I've talked to the sewer department, and the concern was that there were just a couple of different ways that we could set up a sewer system. I thought the way that would make best sense was this, and so you can see we've proposed a manhole cover be put here in order to avoid having to close down 4th Street for a greater period of time. But the concern with that was that in order to qualify for that, I'd have to grant an easement. But my understanding would be that there'd have to be an easement anyway, because people would have to gain access to adjacent lands. And so as a result, the easement my anticipation is that I would grant that anyway. So that would be something that I would be prepared to do, and I think would almost be requisite, I would think.
Well, Hillary, I got a question. If they want to form an HOA or sell these units individually, would they have to come back here? Or is that something that when they do the deed to make them individual ownership, do they have to come back to the city in any form, or are they just?
If they did a condo plat, it would, and it would be a process. So that was what Sean was alluding to, that we could, at that point.
All right, at this
attach
point,
that
it's not a
condition.
condo plot.
Correct,
If
and they
it
could
does
be sold
change,
off.
then they would come back to staff, I would imagine. and
But
have
with
to do
this
something.
subdivision, they could individually be sold off.
Okay. Go ahead, Peter.
Well, the question, City Attorney, is, that- and then this is a private road, I think John makes a good point. Can we make, it's a condition of a homeowners association in the event the land is sold in part and parcel?
You're asking if you can make a condition that a homeowners association be formed? if-
Yes, or something to
property-
address Mr. Engel's issue. You know, it's a private street, you know, and our arguments in the past, if it's a private street, well, you all know it's a private street, so the city's not gonna do anything. Well, in this case, I'm hearing some talk here from the applicant that it could be a city responsibility. But broader issue is what can we do to assure ourselves that the private street will be maintained and et cetera, regardless of who owns the property?
Well, I'm not sure if it's a private street or just a private driveway. We don't typically have any conditions on the maintenance of private driveways.
Very good, okay.
So right
But-
now, it's not a private street. It's
private-
easements that making it a private for the sewer.
I mean, one of the
Access.
findings that that the commission has to make is that access is reasonable. It complies with city standards. I'm not sure that the maintenance is something that is part of the subdivision process on a driveway.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant before I?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as long as the ownership changes, I think you'll realize that just between these owners, you might want an agreement to maintain that driveway. I mean, a full HOA is gonna require a board and reports, and, you know, I think there is a simpler document that could just be a maintenance agreement recorded with that easement, and that you all share in the cost of maintaining.
I,
And
I agree with
that
what-
would be very
I agree
straightforward.
with what you're saying, and I think there's this easier way to get there. And I don't mean to belabor this or cause,
Yeah.
create, some major issue here. It just, I think kicking it around and really understanding what it is, and it's a driveway, not a public street, a private street. If this is a PUD, it would probably be a private street,
Right.
and an HOA would take care of it. So I think the maintenance agreement, as part of the platting is adequate.
Yeah, and I think while you're drafting these other documents, it probably wouldn't be that expensive to, draft an additional document detailing the maintenance, but I don't know if that's something we can specifically require.
I think that's just something you need to,
Yeah.
you need to take care of. I think we just want to kick that around and make sure that that's understood and it's going to be part of this project, but, yep.
I think it's a reasonable request, and I'd be very happy to do the things that we would need to do in order to make sure that the city's interests would be taken care of and that this would not be an inheritable problem that would be passed down, at some point in the future.
Yeah, and that would just get recorded along with the easement. If it ever gets sold, people know what they're buying into. They're buying into a shared cost, and that's easy, so.
Okay, well, all right. Well, thank you, appreciate it. If we have any other questions, we'll get you back up here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Monique Fork is in favor but did not wish to speak? No? Okay, good. And then I have Zach Parks is neutral and did not indicate whether to want to speak.
I'm good.
Oh, no? Okay. That's all I have on our list. There's no reason for rebuttal, I imagine, so I'm going to close public testimony on this, unless there's someone else that is here that didn't sign up that did wish. Oh, I'm sorry.
I would like to speak. I just have to ask a couple of questions. I shoveled once too many days.
Yeah, we can't hear what you're saying. You get up to the
Okay.
mic, I'm sorry. Take your time. And just give me your name and the city you live in.
Norma Darlene Wright. I live in Coeur d'Alene.
Great. And do you swear or solemnly swear to affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth, nothing but the truth? Help you God.
Absolutely.
Go ahead with your questions. Thank you.
Okay, I just have a couple of questions here. I am the president of the Homeowners Association, and the house is on Whisper Drive back onto this area. Okay. So the presentation here has 6 buildings, but there's just 5 lots. There's a house and then a small house on the same lot. Is that acceptable?
Yes. It's an accessory dwelling unit, which is allowed in the city of Coeur d'Alene. So it can be a garage underneath and accommodations above. It's only 800 square feet, but it is part of our ordinance that it is allowed on this kind of a lot.
Okay. And I just want to I see that the departments have all okayed everything. But is there a 25-foot back area between the fence line of the Whisper houses and his road or parking area or whatever?
That we, from staff.
Backs measured from the back of the structures, the homes that he's building, to the property line, so it's not from the driveway.
Right.
So that all setbacks have
From the
been.
back of the building?
Correct.
So the parking area then is taken up in that,
Right.
25 feet?
It's kind of treated like an alley, so our cities, you can build it off of an
Well, there's
alley.
not very much space between the fence line and the roadway.
That is correct, on a portion of it.
Okay. Well, I guess that's the way life goes. Just wondering.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, there
Yes.
is a city code and the subdivision code that says residential lots served by a driveway have to be located in a separate tract, which is what is being proposed, or an easement. And that prior to the issuance of building permits, a maintenance agreement must be recorded on each affected lot. detailing the expected life cycle and maintenance costs for the driveway and defining the pro rata share for each lot.
Someone already covered it.
Sounds like we're covered then. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Brandy. It's very important that you gave us that.
Covered.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, sir. Come on up if you want to speak and sign up on the sheet later. Just give me your name and the city you live in.
My name is Ben Shoemaker. I
Oh.
live in Coeur d'Alene.
All right. And do you solemnly swear and affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Go right ahead.
I just have a question. Who's going to take care of garbage on this thing here? I see that there's a couple dumpsters, and it sounds like there's a plan to make this individual, but a homeowners association sort of thing, and it just feels like it doesn't quite fit out because there's a lot more than just snow removal that takes place to maintain something like this, and this is a private driveway / regular street. Now, who's taking out the trash? There's one other situation that has to be addressed besides snow removal, you see. So there has to be some kind of consideration when this is put together as to how it's going to be managed. And I'm unconvinced. I'm a neighbor. I live in, quite possibly if there's windows up there, they'll be looking into my backyard across the street. And I'm concerned just to see this come together well, and it seems rather crowded to me, and it doesn't sound like it's fully fleshed out to be managed. I could see a lot of other uses for a property like this that could fit this neighborhood and would not overcrowd the area, especially given how crowded 4th Street is. The plans, the larger plan of the city and its traffic flow seems to indicate that 4th Street is a main thoroughfare. And this is a big controversy up in Dalton Gardens, They don't want all the traffic that already is coming up 4th Avenue or 4th Street and going between Coeur d'Alene and Hayden. So what happens when we put, and I can't see the distances there, but it seems like these houses are very close to the street. What happens when you make more houses close to the street? And right now we have a turning lane in the middle of 4th. There's going to be a need to widen it. And there's a lot of traffic on it. Right now, as it stands, around 5 p.m., I see cars backed all the way up past past the turnoff here at the corner. So in general, I have some concerns that others may have that haven't been expressed. But it seems questionable because there are no real plans as to what is going to be built there. And then there's no real plans as to how it's actually going to be managed. And that concludes my comments.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Come on up. Just state your name and the city you're in.
Yeah, Doug Wright, and I live in Coeur d'Alene.
Do you solemnly swear and affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yep. So just kind of my gut sense is that this level of development on this property, adjacent to Whisper, or to the Whispering Pines subdivision, is just kind of inconsistent. We're talking about packing a lot of homes in here, and they're all 2-story. So, and I appreciate the efforts that are going into, or that the applicant stated about limiting the number of windows or the size of windows or whatever on that west or east facing elevation. But the point is that there's still windows, and they're going to look right into the backyard, and those yards aren't very big either. And so, some consideration there. There are fences along that property line, but nonetheless, 2-story buildings packed in 15 feet apart on this lot, or on these 5 lots, just seems a little bit inconsistent. And I would share the same concern that Ben just expressed, in that 4th Street is 1 lane each way with a turning lane. Surely there is some plan in the future, and if there isn't, there will be, probably to widen Fourth Street. It just doesn't make any sense to start packing more buildings in along this stretch. The lot is really small and hasn't been developed for a reason, is what I would submit. And so that's my concerns, for the development of the property. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to speak? Go ahead, Sean, come on up.
We just need to grab the sign-in sheet, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I got a couple of names on there, but.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Mrs. Wright.
All right. Do you wish to address any of the questions that come up?
I think the first issue is that that it's interesting to note that these individual houses are actually farther back from the fence than the neighboring houses are from that same fence.
In the rear.
And so, in fact, when we look at the configuration, I haven't shown on this diagram the houses that are located on Whisper, but if I did, you'd be able to see that with the required setbacks, the individual parcels, number 1, 2, and 3, actually sit fairly far back, and there's a fairly large piece of land that separates them. So my intent is to be a good neighbor, and I want to make sure that the things that we do, if this is approved, are correct, and that they're right for everybody, not just for me. I want to make sure that, that the neighbors are happy about this too. So certainly if there are modifications or other concessions that need to be made in order to facilitate this, I'm happy to work with people. I'd like to point out that the neighbor immediately to the south had a fairly sizable encroachment on the land. So his front yard occurs largely in land that is owned by me now. But what I did was, you'll notice if you look all the way down at the south side of the parcel, there's a triangle that abuts immediately to 4th Street. That triangle is used in the calculations for the 11,000 square feet for lot number 1. But what I told him was that nothing would be built there, and as you can see, this entire process was designed with the concession that that piece of land would not be used, so that he's still able to have a front yard. And I don't need the piece of land to be part of anything that we're doing, and that's exactly why the driveway to the south is configured the way it is. It would have been easy to have that be a larger piece, larger parcel, and have that driveway come directly out without entering 4th Street on a 90-degree angle. But the reason I did that was primarily so that the neighbor would not have to have his yard partially eroded. So that was a concession that was made. I'm happy to work with people. Really would like to be able to just, the reason I mentioned the story is because I wanted to provide an example of the fact that I work with people, and I'm happy to make concessions when I need to, and I actually have done that already.
Questions? Go ahead.
Setback off the street, it's per code 20 feet, is it, off the
Yes.
sidewalk?
I know that certainly there are people in the room who are much more familiar with the
Don,
codes than I am.
Is it 20 feet
and
off the
so,
sidewalk?
but,
Yes.
Which is code?
Property line.
Which is a lot of what 4th Street is as we head south. You're going to see that same exact setback.
I wanted to, if.
John, do you
if
want
it's-
to address the setback?
Setback?
A second, can
Yep.
I need the mic though?
Oh, absolutely.
So setbacks in an R8 are 20 feet from the front, and that is for the interior space that is heated. You are allowed to encroach 10 feet of that 20 feet with a one-story unenclosed, but it can be covered porch, and I think that's some of what you saw in the SketchUp drawing that Chet had provided.
I guess to further clarify, so, and I think I heard this towards the beginning, is all of these this is a very challenging piece to build on. All of these 5 lots meet current setbacks for R8.
Correct.
In all directions.
Right. So I wanted to point something out because the setbacks that are shown here, you can see them if you're trained and have looked at thousands of sets of plans, but they're 20 feet across the front here. And then he has this labeled as 25 across the back, and then one side's 5 and one side's 10, but he's showing 10 over here. But it's actually 20 because of the wastewater easement. Now, let me back up for a second. So this is a subdivision request. He doesn't have to show any of this. He could show the lots and let the building permit dictate where things can be and the access and things of that nature. And he's trying to be as upfront as possible on what he's trying to provide. So I just wanted to point that out. That being said, is once each of these lots are subdivided, the rear yard setbacks are subject to change. So this would be the front, this would be the rear for lot 2, this would be the front for lot 1, the rear would be across here for 25. Once again, 25, 10, 25 will end up being this way, if that makes sense. So each one of the lots will then inherit those setbacks separately once it's split and property lines are created.
And that's standard code setback?
Yes, that is R8 code.
Okay. Bill, you got a question?
Anyone?
No, I don't have a question. I'll make a comment when we
Okay.
get to that
Okay.
point.
All right. John, thank you.
You're welcome.
We're good?
If we're all good, I'll close, unless you have anything else, Chuck, you want to add? Before I close public testimony on it?
I'm sorry, my immune system's not what it used to be, so I sure don't mean to make a social commentary
It's
with the
okay.
mask. I'm just trying to be safe. I'm getting older. And so in terms of questions, if you folks have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. If there are any other issues that I can help with.
Any questions before I close public testimony on this? No? Okay, we're good.
We're good.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to close public testimony on this, bring it to the commission for discussion and motion. Go right ahead, John.
I probably am guilty of confusing, or, taking us off the rails a little bit with the maintenance and whatnot. And I can't help but, look at this little project as though it was a PUD, and it's not. And if it was a PUD, it'd be more of a deliberate, a deliberative, negotiative type process. It'd be more judgmental. There's no deviations. This is a subdivision, as Commissioner Ward points out. With the findings that Sean showed up there, it's really almost a check the box kind of an approach. So with that said, the concerns that I had of maintenance, Mr. Adams pointed out, it's built into the code. I think that's manageable. And as I look at the findings, I think they've all been met.
Okay, great. Further discussion? Go ahead, Phil.
I feel like I am really pretty supportive of housing that we needed here in Kootenai County. And I don't have any problem with 5 units or 5 duplexes, whatever, as long as everything kind of works. I'm real concerned, and I want to be trying to second guess the city engineer, how traffic movement's going to work out on 4th Street, traffic coming in and going out. Not real comfortable with that roadway that remains pretty much undefined, but this is just the plat. I mean, we have a road that's in individual ownership that may be under some type of agreement or may not. I guess my concern, if I was visiting and had an accident, who do I sue? Not that I want to do that. The only other thing is, I understand an accessory dwelling unit must be on the same lot as the primary use. And this kind of meets that, or not, kind of does meet it. But I'm not sure how good a precedent it is for us to be setting to have an accessory unit that is actually across the street from the primary unit. So I don't know that I'm necessarily opposed, but I just have some real reservation what I see here, that's all.
As far as the ADU unit goes, above the garage, it's across the driveway from the one single-family home, which is, I wouldn't say standard. Hillary, you can address that, but it's pretty, is that a common?
Yeah, and actually recently we had the Mahogany Lane subdivision that has the ADUs over garages on the opposite side of the private drive and the driveways and easement, so very similar
Silver
this
Beach
one.
has them all along Silver Beach, because they got nowhere else to go. So they're all on, the easement goes right through, and that is Silver Beach. It divides home and ADU all the time.
I mean, I think it still comes back to the distinction between a driveway and a street. So it looks like a street, but it really is a
Actually, an
driveway.
easement. Yeah, it's an easement
Yep.
driveway.
And Phil, addressing the traffic on Fourth, I hear what you're saying, that Fourth Street has a lot of traffic, and there's a lot of housing units on Fourth Street, and they all come and go, and they.
It's not just they have a lot of traffic, but the two properties across the street have offsetting drives that really don't offset, from what I see, a sufficient distance. So everyone coming out of the South Drive would be exiting, and they'd be, my estimation, probably trying to go south to get down to Neder, get across to Government Way, or down Fourth to 90, and that you have traffic trying to go left at that point. You have two-way traffic plus traffic across the street coming out. It could be pretty substantial, both in the morning and the afternoon. Now, not much you can do about that, to be honest with you. But it's a concern to me in looking at it, that's all.
Okay, great. Appreciate that.
I guess I would say this is a much-needed housing type. We definitely need more units. It's very creative use of a pie-shaped piece of property. I do appreciate that they're individual ownership. I think that's the key into getting people into this market, and whether you own them long-term or short-term. I appreciate that there's an opportunity for individual ownership within these, because that allows people the foot in the door to get in the market, and, kind of establish ownership in our city. So I think that's good. And I think the road stuff will be adequate without creating another board for people to serve on and a lot more hassle. So I think we've established that that's pretty clear. I think it's met all the setbacks as standard, no modifications. So I don't really think there's a lot we can comment on that, except for maybe an opinion. So
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Chair, before, I would like to, that no good deed goes unpunished. I think Sean said that this is more detail than is required when we have something like this. And this detail encourages a discussion up here, which I think is very, very good. I want to thank you and the applicant for the detail you did provide. It's helpful. It leads us into maybe areas we don't need to go, but it gives us discussion, and it's very helpful. I'm certainly supportive of this.
And just before we make a motion, I just want to say thanks to Sean, because I think he worked with the applicant and staff as well to make this piece of property work that could have been developed to something that would still have cars coming and going, and maybe not as many or whatever. But I agree, hopefully down the road, this will be an affordable renting, and then perhaps someone can get in, because it is on 4th Street. It's not out in a desirable, not that this isn't desirable, but in a neighborhood that has a whole bunch of, as we see, expensive homes here. So I want to say thanks to Sean, because I think House and staff came up with this and worked with him, and then the applicant kind of did what he had to do to make this thing hopefully pencil out for you. So I appreciate the time and effort. Go ahead, make a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead.
I don't need to add to what everyone has said. Kudos. This matter having come before, let's make sure, this matter having come before the Planning Commission on January 10th, 2023, and there being present a person requesting approval of item S-1-23, a request for a 5-lot preliminary plat, Cherry Point. The applicants are Charles and Carrie Stringham. The location plus or minus 1.297 acres zoned R8, located east of 4th Street, south of East Whispering Pines Lane, and west of existing homes along North Whisper Drive. Findings, the Planning Commission adopts items B1 through B6, that this has been noticed and printed and pressed. B7, pursuant to section 16.10.030A.1, preliminary plats. In order to approve a preliminary plat, the Planning Commission must make the following findings. B7A, that all the general preliminary plat requirements have been met as determined by the city engineer or his designee. and that has in fact been stated. B7B, that the provisions for sidewalks, streets, alleys, right-of-ways, easements, street lighting, fire protection, planting, drainage, pedestrian and bicycle facilities and utilities are adequate. This is based on the site plan following all setbacks and clearances as determined by all departments and approved by all departments. B7C, that the proposed preliminary plat does comply with all the subdivision design standards contained in chapters 16.15 and all the subdivision improvement standards contained in chapter 16.40, and have been no exceptions or variances requested. It is all as per our codes. B7D, the lots proposed in the preliminary plat do meet the requirements of the applicable zoning district. Again, no exceptions, all standards have been met. And finally, the Planning Commission pursuant to the aforementioned finds that the request of Charles and Carrie Stringham for preliminary plat of approval as described in the application should be approved with consideration for these special conditions itemized below, covering engineering, planning, water, wastewater, and fire. And we did not add anything to that, did we? No. That would be it.
Okay. I have a first by Commissioner Fleming.
Second?
I have a second by McCracken, Commissioner McCracken. Roll call, Shannon, please.
Fleming?
Yes.
Ingalls?
Yes.
Mandel?
Yes.
McCracken?
Yes.
Lutrip?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Messina?
Yes. Congratulations, it passes. Best of luck to you. Thank you. Okay, next, we have, it's a PUD 1-03M modification to a single lot in a plan unit development known as Greystone. And we have Sean back once again.
This time we will actually talk about a PUD. Because it is an existing PUD. Give me a moment here. What is this?
Sean, I think go back, hit cancel, and then I think you have to enable the, oh, maybe you're good.
It's a warning. All right. Thank you for the patience while I get set up here. Okay, so this is a modification request for a PUD, PUD 1-03M. And to best understand this, there is a PUD that encompasses a number of lots. I believe it's 21 lots. There's tracts of open space, and it's known as the Greystone PUD. This particular request is a modification for a single lot inside of that PUD that has been reviewed by the HOA and signed off architecturally, assuming that they can get approval for the modification of the PUD that's here tonight. So the property owner of that single lot is Jeffrey Lyman. He resides at 3103 North 22nd. The consultant is also here, Corey Trapp of Longwell and Trapp Architects. The size of the lot is 0.8 of an acre, so it's a fairly large lot. It's zoned R3 PUD, and that same address and the legal notice was published prior to this hearing and also sent out as required by code. So the request tonight before Planning Commission is the applicant is requesting a modification to allow a double frontage lot access as well as additional hillside disturbance on that single lot for a garage shop that is down below. And so some background information here is there was initially a PUD in 2000 that was approved with a subdivision, but it was never developed, and then the PUD Greystone was subdivided and the PUD approved in 2003 with conditions. So the applicant this property suffered some damage when there was a windstorm back in October of 2021. He had hired a crew to go out there and clean up the mess. At the same time, he thought, oh, this would be a good time since everything's mobilized to disturb the area and prep it for a future garage. Somebody had made the city aware of what was going on. I don't think he understood that it was a hillside lot. He was made aware that it was a hillside lot, and he said, okay, well, what do I got to do to come into compliance and get approval? And so he worked with staff and come together for a modification of this PUD. And so these are the pictures. This is a street view from Google, and then also when it was being disturbed. Be aware too, my staff report does mention this, is that there's a petroleum pipeline that runs right along the right side of this photo as well. And the applicant is fully aware that it exists. So, unlike a subdivision, PUD has a lot more findings. So there's 7 total findings for a planned unit development, and it's A through G. They are listed right here, and I will go through them. Finding B8A is the proposal in conformance with the comprehensive plan or not? This is the future land use map for the city of Coeur d'Alene, our new comprehensive plan. This is where that subject property is located, and it's identified as planned development because it's an existing PUD. And here is the location of this PUD, and specifically that lot is located right here. So there is a description inside of the comp plan of what a planned development is. It can vary quite a bit. It can be located in many different zones. There are some minimum qualifiers. It does need to be 1.5 acres, and it does not increase density, but it allows for design changes to bulk, or to height, setback, parking, that sort of thing, the dimensional standards. The comprehensive plan policy framework, I've identified a couple of goals and objectives here for community identity, as well as environment and recreation. Specifically, the one that is the most targeted towards this particular request is objective ER 3.4 is protect the natural and topographic character, identity, and aesthetics quality of hillsides. So finding B8B is that the design and planning of the site is or is not compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent properties. Well, it's single-family homes. It's part of an existing PUD. It's almost built out. I think there's at least one lot left that hasn't been built. Open spaces up here to the north. There's a couple of smaller little open space areas along here. I believe there was a requirement for a pump house or some sort of water requirement so that they could get the pressure that they needed up in this area because it's elevated. The subject property is located right here in this red dashed area as one of 21 buildable lots. So so here's the actual request. So north is actually this way. You can see the north arrow. It's going to turn to the side. Current access comes off of 22nd Street. This goes into the existing home there with a garage. He is requesting access off of Nettleton Gulch Road here, so the additional disturbance would be located for a driveway here and then a garage right here. Corey Trapp has provided some architectural renderings as required by a PUD, and you can see here it's a 3-car garage is what's shown. Inside of the rear 25-yard setback, maximum height will be 18 feet to the peak, and as shown here, it is built into the hillside to keep it from towering over Nettleton Gulch, also to provide access to the 3 doors for vehicles. I can tell you that it's not going to be white because there's a requirement in the hillside code that light reflective value is 40 or less, so it has to be a darker color, probably similar to the home, so that it doesn't stick out on the hillside. Right, so finding B8C is that the proposal is or is not compatible with the natural features of the site and adjoining properties. So the average slope of the lot, it's a hillside lot, is 22%. 25% automatically by code is not allowed to be disturbed. When you add those together, that is the retention and natural state that's required by hillside code. And so currently 16,845 square feet of the property has been developed, and they're requesting an additional 3,600 square feet on the site. And so right now, 53% of the site has been disturbed, and that is basically the maximum that they were allowed, and they're allowing for, they are requesting an additional 6% to allow 59% of the site to be disturbed. So finding B8D is the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will or will not be adequately served by existing public facilities and services. And I forgot one thing. I do want to go back because it is important. Double frontage lots. So our code does require in a regular subdivision that if you have streets on opposite of the front, so if you have access from one side of the street and there is a street to the rear, that a subdivision today would require that a tract or some sort of buffer is created to prevent access from both sides of the lot for two reasons. Usually one of those streets is fairly busy, and you don't want to have the access from one street driving all the way through to the other in a single private lot like that. So that is the reason for that code. The reason why he is able to make this request is because it is a PUD, and a PUD allows deviations, assuming that they're approved by Planning Commission, to make changes to those types of things. So access, height, parking, those setbacks, those sort of things. So if this was your typical R3 with no PUD, this wouldn't even come up because staff would say it's not allowed. So now that you understand where that request is coming from and what allows the request to come forward. So finding B8D, I did read that. City staff from Streets, Engineering's Water and Fire, Wastewater departments have reviewed the application. Staff has indicated that there's adequate public services and facilities that are available. Page 8 of the staff report does provide the full staff comments. So finding B8E is that the proposal does or does not provide adequate private, common, open space areas determined by the commission, no less than 10%. It must be accessible to all, and it also must be taken care of, which is the next one that John had spoke about in the previous, is that that perpetual maintenance of these areas are required as part of a PUD. The PUD has already been built out, the open space exists, and and that it is perpetual maintenance is already happening for the entire site. The other is that off-street parking does or does not provide sufficient space for users of the development. So no modifications were requested with the original PUD. These are large estate-style homes. Almost every single one of them has parking above and beyond the minimum standard of 2 parking stalls per single-family home. So this one, right, the garage alone is a 3-car garage, and there's an existing garage up above, so it meets the standard. And as stated, the HOA already maintains the property. So there are some recommended conditions that the staff of the city of Coeur d'Alene have come up with. Planning would like to see that any of the significant trees that were lost due to the windstorm that are not located in the footprint that I showed there in yellow or within the proposed driveway would be replaced, so that we're meeting the significant tree portion requirement of the hillside code. We also do not want any gates constructed along Nettleton Gulch because of access and turning movements. We don't want cars sitting in Nettleton Gulch waiting for a gate to open or close. Overhead power exists along Nettleton Gulch, and they need to contact the power company to make sure that they're in compliance with whatever requirements that they have there. And all easements must be adhered to. The Yellowstone pipeline is there, and they are aware of it. Water, that's the typical policy requirements that were also on the previous one. Any capitalization fees will be required at the time of building permit. And so with that, I'll end my presentation, and Planning Commission must consider the PUD request modification to make findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice. With that concludes my report. Take questions.
Quick question. There
Sure.
are 2 more parcels that could be dual frontages. Does this approval then allow that open door to, or do they have to come back through this whole thing again?
Fantastic question, because I posed it to the applicant as well earlier. And so I do know the answer to this one, which is great. We did ask, because there are a couple of others that are there, if they, if you're going to go in this distance, if they want the access, now's the time to ask. And they did not want or seek access at this time. So if these other two lots ever decide they wanted to do something similar, they will take a trip back to Planning Commission.
But they can use this as the wedge that gets in the door.
They
Got it.
will most likely say that my neighbor got it approved, let me
Okay.
through the gate.
All right, thanks.
John?
Sean, I'm just trying to understand the magnitude of this a little bit. Would you help me with the math a little bit? So I took the square footage of the lots, 34,631. You take 53% of that, that's 18,354.43 that can be disturbed. And so if I take away the existing residents of 16,845, that would leave, if you will, a 1,509 square foot. I still have cap space, if you will, of I can go out and disturb 1,509 more square feet within that 53%, as I did the math. Does that
Right.
sound right? So they're asking for 3,600 for basically what this deviation comes down to is 2,000 square feet more disturbed land. Is that correct?
It does. However, one thing to be aware of is that disturbed area also includes construction sites. So they're going to have to get a machine back there and get behind and dig down. And so anything that's actually disturbed is a part of that calculation, not just the footprint of the structure.
So it doesn't mean that the footprint of that plate of that garage is 3,600 square feet. That's where I was going with that. So really, it's less significant then when you look at it that way. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just
Yeah.
sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Just confirming sort of the intent of the hillside ordinance or the hillside overlay zone is really to protect from excessive erosion and drainage that would be dangerous to the area or the surrounding areas. And it seems, based on the staff report, that this is the least amount of damage on that hillside, that the potential impact is low.
The potential impact is low because there's not a lot of slope down there. But that being said, the hillside code also does require that there's a geotech done so that staff understands, hey, if they do decide to disturb this, what are the soils? What's the recommended, the recommended, what is the construction type that is required to make sure this thing doesn't slide off the hill out onto the road or something of that nature. There's also BMPs, which are best management practices. So they have to put up the straw wattles and prevent the dirt from running down out into the street under construction. And they have to replant areas that are disturbed so that they have some sort of root system in them to keep the soil from sloughing off.
And I did see as a condition that anything that had been removed by the storm or the kind of cleanup would be the applicant's responsibility based on the recommendations or requirements of the urban forester. So since a lot of this has already happened, right, and didn't do the netting or whatever, it's really a matter of like what
Was there before?
what was there before or what is really needed to remediate. It sounds like really only some plantings.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Yeah, Peter?
It's amazing how we all have the same ideas up here. One of my questions was the purpose of the hillside ordinance, and that certainly responded. The other question is, what others have we approved? What other deviations to the hillside ordinance have we approved in the past?
For this particular site or just citywide?
Generally.
Citywide.
Understand. Wow, that's
Lots.
And
a loaded
think of
question.
it.
There's
Bunch, not
a
very-
lot.
But a recent one was even Atlas Waterfront. that one had some slopes, so we're subject to it.
So secondly, I'm not the arithmetic or math major that my friend John is, but something simpler. It says here, the new disturbed area will be 59%. The allowed disturbed area is 53%, so we're talking about 6%. That's, I think, is nominal. I think, at least in my mind. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, thanks, Sean, appreciate it.
Absolutely. So with that, I will turn it over to Planning Commission. I do not believe that there was a
Corey?
PowerPoint, but Corey may want to come up and speak.
Yeah, Corey isn't signed up, so I don't know if Corey wants to talk, but I have Jeff Lyman, who's the applicant, so I don't know if he wants to speak or who wants to speak. Okay, both of you coming up.
That's okay. That's perfect. All right, if you go one up or down, that'll give you.
That's all I need. Yeah. Corey Trapp, Longwell Chop Architects, live in Coeur d'Alene.
Do you solemnly swear and affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay. And Jeff, I'm going to ask you the same thing. If you're going to speak, just say yes if you do.
I do, yes.
Okay, go right ahead.
Right. Thank you. Pleasure to be in front of you tonight. I have to correct one thing that Sean talked about. He said that 53% of the lot had been developed, but that's not really actually, only 35 to 40% of it's actually developed right now.
When I was running with that, I said 53% was developable.
Correct.
Of which only 16,845
Right. So, and then the structure itself is only going to be the footprint is about 800 square feet, but to be able to put it in, as Sean described, we have to disturb about 3,600. The plan would be to go back in, the plan is to build the garage structure into the hillside for two reasons: to minimize the impact and the size of it, but also to get the driveway so it's down close to the road, so we don't have a steep driveway coming out onto Nettleton Gulch, and also to get under the power lines. We had looked at several other options of where we could locate the garage. This is the least amount of disturbed area that we can do. We're getting it as close as we can. We're still having a safe driveway distance to Nettleton Gulch. It also allows, this configuration allows us, you can pull out of one of the driveways. If you're pulled in head first, you can turn around in the driveway and then pull out head first into Nettleton Gulch if you needed to.
And Corey, I got a question on the pictures that showed the before and after calculations that you're talking about that's disturbed. Was that just for what was there, or is it going to be more than what we saw?
There's area outside of, so that disturbed area comes up into here.
Okay.
Right now, that's gonna all get remediated, and with new trees and things like that.
Okay.
And then around it here, we'll plant native vegetation back into the area that's disturbed, around for the new garage.
So was where the proposed garage, has that been disturbed yet or not yet, or?
The driveway the current cut comes right up right through that right now,
so
through that
the
area.
pictures we saw before and after relates to that, but not actually where the garage is going to sit. Okay, thank you.
So just a little history, Dr. Lyman had talked to someone at city staff in the building department. He unfortunately got a little misled on directions instead of talking to planning, and that's part of why this occurred. So we're trying to make it right now.
Sure.
And do it the correct way. So, and we're very aware of the Yellowstone pipeline. I've built other structures next to it. We don't want to be anywhere close to that or on top of it. So, and the other thing, we'll probably move the garage a little bit closer to that setback. And the main reason for that is there's a turn a little bit further down, and we want to be away from that so we have good lines of visibility going both ways. So when you're pulling out, you can see somebody. Okay. And then, of course, it's just a mass model of the building. The plan is to make it look similar in style and character and colors to the main residence, and that's part of the CCNRs in the subdivision too. So. Okay. that took care of my notes.
Corey, I got a question for
Yes.
you. I know that the hillside ordinance says, you know, you gotta get geotech reports and things like that, but what's happened, and you guys say you're gonna do the best you can to make it better. Soil conditions, given the fact that, I guess, I don't know if any reports have been done or anything, not saying, I'm not asking for anything like that.
Yeah, we
but-
haven't done that yet, but we'll do
Okay.
that because it is a requirement. We'll do
Okay.
that. The back of the structure will be designed as a retaining wall because it's recessed into the ground. So that will help with retention of the hillside and everything too. And then along each side of the driveway in here, there'll be we'll use the boulders that are there on site. Do a little bit of retention on either side here on that. And then the swales would be down here on either side to collect the water off the roof and any other driveway water.
Okay, and I imagine that back retaining wall is gonna be substantially high,
And it'll probably be about 10,
Right.
between 10 and 12 feet tall.
Okay. Still, standard
Right.
hillside ordinance construction that has to be done to maintain
Right.
the land, so it doesn't slide on Nettleton Gulch down the road. Okay.
And we'll be only a couple feet above Nettleton Gulch, so that's the main reason for recessing it into the hillside.
And this, Hillary, this still has to come in front of you guys for review and
Right, through the
all
building permit
other requirements
process.
that are needed.
With Hillside, we make sure they have the geotech and all of that, and then they work with the urban forester on that remediation plan.
Okay, great. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine. Jeff wanted to add a couple comments.
First of all, I'd like to thank the commission for their time. I feel like some of the other projects that were presented tonight were more necessary on a community basis. This is more obviously a recreational addition to my personal home. I also feel bad that I got kind of stuck in the middle of this. Now trying to fix something that I did, kind of apologize for going, I take credit for the mistake that was made digging in the ground. I did want to make sure that this was done right, so I went and talked to all the neighbors, both in my development as well as down Nettleton Gulch. I knocked on doors and talked to all the neighbors that I could find and had them give their inputs. I really don't want to be in the eye of the storm. I'm not looking for a fight here tonight. Everyone was supportive. The main issue that everyone had was just traffic along that stretch of Nettleton Gulch. So I think we're trying to accommodate the fact that we can see both ways, not back out onto the street. I don't think we'll really add much in the way of traffic to Nettleton Gulch with this development. This will be mostly just a recreational shop structure. So I think there's kind of community buy-in. I don't think that the commission is going to run into a lot of complaints, is my understanding. That's pretty much all I had to say. Thank you.
Right. Go right ahead.
I do have one other. Their question came up about the adjacent other two lots that could potentially do this. Their topography is much, much steeper. I mean, they're probably 60-70% slope. So it would be very, very difficult for either of those two lots to even do this on their properties. So.
Thanks, Corey. Questions? No? Okay. If anything comes up, I'll get you guys back.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. I have Dave Bonasera. I can't.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
No, didn't wish, you're in favor, didn't wish to speak. And then I have Shelley Kosko, as just indicated neutral. Okay. I have no one else. Okay. Corey, Jeff, nothing to add? I'm going to close public testimony. Okay, I'm going to close public testimony on this, bring it to commissioners for discussion and a motion.
I'll say.
Go ahead, Phil.
Now, when it comes to building on slopes and hills, I'm going to trust the engineers and the architects that they can get it done right. And I really like Peter's numbers, 6%. There are no objectives here. The applicant wants it. The homeowners association approved it. Who am I to object?
Okay.
Well put, well put. I think a key thing on page 7 of the staff report says that, quote, "There's a minimal effect on erosion and runoff for the site." That's great. And I think another positive in this is that, you know, we can condition this if we go forward and approve it. We can condition it to have those remediation and reforestation aspects of it, and without it going forward, there's no requirement to go do that, so I think that's a big plus.
Okay. Further discussion?
I would make this motion if you'd like.
Right ahead.
So PUD 1-03M, this matter having come before the Planning Commission on January 10th, 2023, and there being present a person requesting approval of PUD 1-03M, a request for a modification of a single lot in a planned unit development known as Greystone. Applicant is Jeffrey R. Lyman. Location 0.8 acre lot, legally described as Lot 1, Block 1, Lot 14 in the Greystone PUD, commonly known as 3103 North 22nd Street. Motion made would include findings B1, B3, which are simply findings of fact. B8, that pursuant to section 17.07.230 planned unit development review criteria, a planned unit development may be approved only if the proposal conforms to the following criteria to the satisfaction of the Planning Commission, that the proposal is in conformance with the comp plan, and this is based on a number of policies listed in our worksheet here that are supported by the approval of this motion, with strong emphasis on the preservation and enhancement of the beauty and health of Coeur d'Alene's natural environment, and to approve the urban forestry, et cetera, and the protection of natural and topographic character, identity, and aesthetic quality of hillsides. B8B, that the design and planning of the site is compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent property, and base that motion on the staff report provided by Sean and the applicant's testimony with respect to the layout of the buildings and the architectural style and the massing and bulk and all those things that we've looked at, and reforestation and remediation. B8C, motion would include the finding that the proposal is compatible with the natural features of the site and adjoining properties. In the case the property is located within the hillside overlay zone, which this is, that it does not create soil erosion, sedimentation of lower slopes, slide damage, or flooding problems, that it prevents surface water degradation or severe cutting or scarring, reduces the risk of catastrophic wildfire in the wildland-urban interface, and complements the visual character and nature of the city. So that is based, the motion would base that on the testimony provided, the exhibits provided, and the staff report statement on page 7, that, quote, unquote, it would provide a minimal effect on erosion and runoff, and this being as it was mentioned, a nominal disturbed additional small square footage. Finding B8D, the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will be adequately served by existing streets, public utilities, and services, and that's based on the staff report and testimony provided that traffic is negligible, utilities are available, there's no issues provided by staff. B8E, the proposal does provide adequate private common open space as determined by the commission, no less than 10% of gross land area free of buildings, streets, driveways, and parking areas. The common open space shall be accessible to all users of the development and usable for open space and recreation purposes. As page 9 of the staff report points out, the open space of Greystone would not be changed as a result of this. B8F, off-street parking does provide adequate parking sufficient for users of the development. No parking modifications are made as a result of this modification, so that will be met. And finally, B8G, that the proposal does provide for acceptable method of perpetual maintenance of the common area. The Greystone PUD remains in effect with respect to its HOA. So as a conclusion of decision, the Planning Commission pursuant to the aforementioned finds that the request of Jeffrey R. Lyman for approval of the planned unit development as described in the application should be approved, and noted that there are 6 conditions, 4 relating to planning and 2 relating to water.
Thank you, John, appreciate it. You need a second?
I'll second.
I have a second by Commissioner Fleming. Roll call, Shannon, please.
Fleming.
Yes.
Ingalls.
Yes.
Mandel.
Yes.
McCracken.
Yes.
Lutrip.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Messina.
Yes. Okay, motion passes. Best of luck. Okay, getting back to the beginning.
Now we get to flip to the
Come
front.
full circle. Next is a proposal warehouse storage special use permit in the C17 zoning district. RC Worst is the applicant. Thanks for sticking around, Tammy.
You're welcome.
It's not the engineer, that must be RC Worst.
All right, thank you. So the applicant is R.C. Worst & Company, and the engineer consultant is Olson Engineering. So Jeremy Trezulli is in Hayden at another public hearing. He did not make it back. His representative, Stephen Soltis, is here for him, who will speak on their behalf. So I'll give you a little history on this. On November 8th, 2022, the Planning Commission heard the request of Jeremy Trezulli with Olson Engineering on behalf of R.C. Worst & Company requesting a storage and warehouse special use permit. During that meeting, there were a number of concerns from the commission and the neighbors, and the commission determined it would be best to table the item in order for the applicant to address some of the concerns discussed by the commission and the neighbors. So the property is located at 601, 603, and 609 East Best, and this was published in the press on October 22nd, 2022. And this is the location map, giving you an idea of where this is. It's outlined in the red. This is Best. And this is a little better aerial photo. It's outlined again in the red. These houses have been removed. This is the storage lot that currently exists, and they're asking for the special use permit to make this a legal use and to expand it as a whole. This is the R.C. Worst Company that's currently located here on the site. And this is a bird's eye view, and it's outlined here. So I provided a little background information about the history on this and when the Planning Commission did hear it. And the applicant has provided an updated site plan. I'll give you a few changes from the old site plan to the new one. The proposed approach was located here on 6th Street on the older site plan, and they also had an existing approach with a security gate. They were asking for the buffer. The city requires the buffer. The buffer is going to be located here all the way around the site, and then here where it does abut the residential home. And they had it on the outside of the existing fencing. In the new site plan, they addressed a number of the concerns. The neighbor to the north on 6th Street expressed concerns with the maintenance of the buffer and that it was being proposed along the outside of the existing fence line of the subject property. So this northern buffer has been moved on the inside of the fence. I did speak with the neighbor yesterday. They're happy with the site plan and all the upgrades that have been made. There was also a concern with the access point to the subject property that was located along 6th Street near the residential homes, and that was the one I pointed out located over here. They have moved the access to enter the storage yard. It was removed from 6th Street and relocated along Best Avenue after coordinating with Chris Bosley, the city engineer. The exit has also been moved to 6th Place and located further north away from the intersection. So the exit has been moved here and moved further north. In addition, Chris Bosley also stated that the relocated approach locations shown on the revised site plan provide better circulation in and out of the site while minimizing impacts to the residential streets. Relocating the approach on Sixth Place to the north, away from Best Avenue as shown, also reduces the conflicts at the intersection, while relocating the Sixth Street approach to Best Avenue as shown. And it provides for the use of a left turn lane and removes truck traffic from Sixth Street. And Streets and Engineering has no objections to the revised site plan. The other item that's changed on this, there were comments from the neighbors and concerns with the R.C. Worson Company employees parking on both sides of Sixth Place. The applicant has provided 10 employee parking spaces along the northeast portion of the subject property for employee parking, which are located here. There's also a side obscuring fence all the way around that, and this will be paved. So there are 3 required findings for this requested special use permit. Finding B8A, that the proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The subject property is within the city limits, and the city's 2022 to 2042 comprehensive plan categorizes this area as retail center corridor place type. And this is the subject property here. And this is all retail center corridor, and again, this is a subject property. And it is described as retail center corridor places are primarily car-oriented destinations for retail services, hotels and motels, and restaurants along major streets. The locations are often developed with large format retail uses with some infill commercial developments, typically 1 to 3 stories. Places are typically not walkable and generally have limited civic and other public uses, but they are often located on major arterials that may be served by transit. Finding B8B, the design and planning of the site is or is not compatible with the location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent properties. So land uses in the area are single-family, residential to the north of subject parcels, as well as single-family dwellings to the east and to the west. There are commercial uses, Lyle's Enterprises, and a food truck court on the south side of Best Avenue, along with other established commercial businesses. And Bestland Senior Living Community, senior apartments, are located northwest of the subject property along Best Avenue. And we've already gone over the site plan and provided a little background on that and the changes that were made and updated. And this is the natural features and adjoining properties. Here are the contours. It doesn't look like there are any here on this subject property. And I'll quickly go through the site photos to kind of give you an idea of the context of that. So this is looking north at the subject property, and this is the existing fence. And as I mentioned in the updated site plan, they would have the buffer on the inside of the fence to mitigate the concerns of the neighbor. And this is looking at the subject property that they want to expand the yard, and this is currently where they've got their supplies stored. And this is looking east at the subject property, and this is Best Avenue. And again, looking at some of the items that they have stored on the subject property. And this is looking west at a portion of the subject property. And this is the neighboring property to the north, and it's on that northeast corner. And again, a site photo of the lot where they want to expand. And this is looking at the existing principal use and the expansion of where they want to provide their storage area again. And this is looking south on Best Avenue at the food trucks that are existing there and some of the other businesses. And this is directly south, and this is Lyle's business. This is the current zoning map. The red indicates the zoning, which is commercial, and the subject property is outlined here in red. And this is R12, which are the residential uses that I mentioned. This is also C17 and commercial use. And as far as land use, this is indicating it's currently vacant. They did remove the single-family homes. And commercial. Finding B8C, that the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will or will not be adequately served by existing streets, public facilities, and services. And city staff did provide comments in the staff report, and each department indicated there are adequate public facilities and public utilities available to serve the proposed request and did not have any objections to this request. As far as trip generation manual, Warehousing, it is estimated that the proposed .43 acre addition to the existing storage yard could generate approximately 23 trips per day due to the small sample size used to forecast traffic. ITE cautions to use. And while the east parcel already is being used for storage, the additional area for storage is not expected to result in a substantial increase in traffic. With the business located across Sixth Place from the site, trips will likely be short with a minimal impact to the traveling public. And there are additional comments in your staff report. As I mentioned, site plan has been updated after coordinating with the development team and Chris Bosley, and I provided the feedback we got from Chris Bosley that he was satisfied with the changes. So there are a total of 12 recommended conditions, and these 3 conditions deal with the site plan, the buffer, and screening that we talked about on the site plan. The second condition, a site development permit would be required to ensure the buffer yard regulations have been met. And the applicant will be required to submit a landscape buffer plan showing the buffers and landscaping noted in condition 1, and that will also be required to be part of the site development plan. They would be required to submit a lot consolidation application prior to the issuance of the site development permit, and a copy of that lot consolidation must be submitted at that time. And then there are a number of other conditions from engineering, urban forestry with regard to street trees and along the frontage, and then wastewater. So action alternatives, the Planning Commission will need to consider this request and make appropriate findings to approve, deny, or deny without prejudice.
Thank you, Tammy. Questions to Tammy?
Was the client or the project, did they agree to all these special conditions with no concerns?
No.
Great, thanks.
And there is a presentation that will be provided by the applicant's representative, and they do have a site plan to share a little more information about what they're going to provide.
Peter, you had a question?
No, I have a comment, and maybe this should be after the presentation, but I want to thank the city and Tammy and everyone working together. When we had this before us last time, we had some citizens involved. We had quite a few people involved. There was quite a few questions that came up, and it seems that everything was worked through to everybody's satisfaction, and we can progress. And that was a result, I think, of the staff taking extra time, and the developer and the citizens. It does count, it does help to have public testimony. Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you.
Peter. Okay. Hi, Steve. Just state your name and city you live in. I'll swear you in.
Steve Soltis, I'm from Olson Engineering. I live in Post Falls.
Do you solemnly swear and affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Steve.
And I'm not really planning on saying a whole lot because everything's already been covered and the couple of issues that were here last time have been resolved, so. I read this for the first time today, so I think everybody knows this stuff. Let me get to the kind of the meat of the issue here. I guess this is it. The commercial approach on 6th Street was moved to Best. The employee parking was added inside the storage area, so it'd be off the street. The buffering, rather than being on the residential side of the fence, it's going to be on the inside to make sure it gets maintained properly. And the approach on 6th Place has been moved north away from the intersections to avoid conflicts there. And yeah, here we go. So we've got our swale here, the buffering inside the fence, and of course the street side buffering that's required. And then the same thing here, the landscaping on the south side of the fence. So, is there more than this? I think this has all been covered already. Whoops. Yeah, I think this has all been covered already. If you have any questions, or you want me to talk about anything about that in particular, fire away.
Questions? No?
Good to go?
Okay, thank you,
Thank
sir,
you.
appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to close public testimony on this and bring it to commission for discussion, if there's any, and a motion. Go ahead, John.
Just discussion, I'd just like to echo Commissioner Luttrup's comment that, you know, kudos to staff, kudos to the applicant of taking time and really working with the neighbors. I think that's valuable. And I think there's a lesson here that sometimes the tool that's out there of tabling an item and taking a little bit more time to go, you know, really work it, what ends up with a better result in the end. And in this case, we have as you point out, a business that's been there for 70 years. You know, I mean, we owe it to them to protect their needs and interests and whatnot. But yet, you know, it's commercial butting right up to residential, and we have to look out for the needs of the neighborhood as well. So I think you pulled that off very well. So well done.
Go ahead.
I'll make one comment. Since when I was standing on that side of the counter, not here, at other places, the only thing worse than tabling you was being denied. But even the tabling was tough to deal with. But also in engineering, we did the plan, the client agreed to it, staff apparently worked with them, and the comments that were raised up here were all addressed. I think they did a great job and satisfied us and satisfied the staff.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. What we need is a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
Again. This matter having come before the Planning Commission on January 10th, 2023, and there being present a person requesting approval of item SP-3-22, a proposed warehouse storage special use permit in the zoning district. Applicant is R.C. Wurst and Company, Inc. Location is 601, 603, and 609 East Best Avenue. We acknowledge the Planning Commission adopting the standard B1 through B6. B8, pursuant to section 17.09.220 special use permit criteria, a special use permit may be approved only if the proposal conforms to all the following criteria to the satisfaction of the Planning Commission. B8A, the proposal is in conformance with the comprehensive plan as follows. I think we've more than met the objective C1 2.1, maintain the community's friendly, welcoming atmosphere in its small town feel. And objective GD 1.5, recognize neighborhood and district identities. And lastly, objective JE 1.2, foster a pro-business culture that supports economic growth and maintains a long-standing business in place. B8B, the design and planning of the site is compatible with location, setting, and existing uses on adjacent properties. That is confirmed by the commercial uses adjacent and elder care facility across the street. Does the density or intensity of the project fit? Absolutely. There's an improved access and with minimum impact to the adjacent neighbors who post-dated, most likely, this business. And is the proposed development compatible with existing land use? Yes, it's commercial, abutting, residential, well-managed. B8C, the location, design, and size of the proposal are such that the development will be adequately served by existing streets, public facilities, and services, which it has done for many, many years. In conclusion, the Planning Commission, pursuant to the aforementioned, finds the R.C. Wurst and Company, Inc. for a special use permit, as described in the application, should be approved with the acceptance of the special conditions, in particular the planning showing buffering and plantings, a consolidation of parking that takes it off the street for the staff, which is brilliant, and engineering, curbs and sidewalks, addressing a number of curb cuts, et cetera, and then adding in some vegetation. And finally, that's it.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have first, need a second.
I'd like to second it, Mr.
I have a second from Commissioner Luttrop. Roll call, Shannon?
Fleming.
Yes.
Ingalls.
Yes.
Mandel.
Yes.
McCracken.
Yes.
Luttrip.
Yes.
Ward.
Yes.
Messina.
Yes. Motion passes. Congratulations, thank you. Before I close this meeting, I see there's a couple of students back there that have been there for a long time. They're also at a parking commission meeting. They had to do this for school, I think, to get credit, or I don't know what it is, but if you need me to sign anything, to say yes, you were here, I gladly
They
will.
stayed awake the whole time.
They did, they did, they did. So I just wanted to point that out, you hung in there. And maybe one day you'll be up here, sitting over there, you never know. Motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to adjourn, but if we're not going to have possibly a meeting in February, I always comment, and I'll make my comments in January about February very quickly.
Okay.
And I would just like to acknowledge the 21st of February for my friend Butchie, who will be still still older than George Washington. So Butch, happy birthday.
Very good.
Thank
Wish
you.
him the best. Okay, need a motion to adjourn.
That's my
So
motion.
moved.
I have a first, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.